Hello, today we'll be talking about um, POP3S and also SMTPS. Uh, yeah, this is by Julian. So the agenda today is POP3S, POP3S, configuring it using Dovecot for Linux. We also have SMTPS today. This is both using IIS on Windows or postfix for Linux. So first off, we have POP3S. Um, so POP3S, POP3S stands for the Secure Post Office Protocol 3. 3 as in third version. So this is very commonly used, or POP3 is very commonly used as an email server to receive emails over the internet. This is, yeah, like I just said, used to receive emails from a remote server and either send them to a local client or get rid of them. Um, this is a one-way client server protocol. So like I said in the last one, you're getting the emails, the client is getting the emails from the remote server, and it's one way. POP3S offers a means of downloading emails from a server to the client, which also explains the one way. It goes from the server to the client. And doing this, the downloading of the emails enables clients to read the emails offline. So basically, a client can go access the remote server, get the emails onto their device, or download the emails, and then once the emails are downloaded, they no longer need service or connection to the server in order to read the emails. Emails get deleted once the client has it. So basically, once the this was written wrong, but once the client has downloaded the emails from the remote server basically deletes them. So it's only on the client's device now. This is built into many popular clients. One example of this would be Microsoft Outlook, which is very popular. We use it at Kennesaw State University. Very commonly used email server. So POP3S functions on two ports. This is port 110, which is typically non-encrypted use, and port 995, which is typically secure use. So POP3S would typically be used on 995 because it's the secure version of POP3. So POP3S, Pop and POP3 are very popular because it is easy to use, efficient email server. It typically has minimal errors and is very simplistic, so easy to use. Next we have POP3S continued. So POP3S starts by listening on the TCP port 110. And then this makes the client and the server enter authorization state. Once they're in there, they go into the transaction state where they exchange commands. They exchange commands, and then in order to leave the session, the client will use a quit command, and this is when the server would delete anything that was released to the client. And also the TCP connection is closed, and you would use the quit command in order to leave the session. Next we have how to install POP3S. So first you would install dovecode and then use the commands to configure and install and then configure. Then you would find and enable the protocols you would want to install. So there's a bunch of protocols that you can install, but in our case it would be POP3 and IMAP, and then you would go in and enable SSL for security, or TLS. Some hardening recommendations for POP3S would be configuring the client for email retrieval and correct security settings like SSL or TLS. So making sure that the correct email is being used, stuff like that, and also configuring SSL or TLS for email encryption. Next, we have to secure the mail server by using firewall rules to monitor and filter traffic on port 110 or 995, which are the typical ports for POP3. We also have, and this is very important for port 110 because it was less secure. And then next we have to enable SMTP authentication, which can prevent unauthorized use of the mail server or the grabbing if the interception of mail. So it makes it harder for the attacker to read intercepted mail if they can intercept it. Next we have SMTPS protocol. This stands for Secure Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. Securing SMTP, use of transport layer security or TLS to secure the SMTP. So we use TLS to secure SMTP, making it, yeah. This requires partners who are trying to mail each other to authenticate themselves. Securing SMTP offers encryption. You need to make sure to use TLS or SSL in order to secure the data in the mail server, the data being transferred. Securing SMTP offers asymmetric cryptography. Sorry, I can't speak. And this secures the email, so they are less likely to be vulnerable to attacks. So they are less likely to be attacked, but they're also less likely to be available to attack. So it protects against all sorts of attacks, some of which are man-in-the-middle attacks. Like I said, encryption or using TLS or SSL stops it from being able to be read by the attacker. And emails or messages being intercepted, it's less likely that they're going to be able to be forwarded to an attacker. If an attacker intercepts the email, they won't be able to forward it to themselves. So SMTPS protocol is typically used on port 587 or port 465. Port 465 is the typical means for using SMTPS protocol, and it is much more secure. It's mainly for secure communication. Here we have a continued SMTPS protocol. This is basically installation notes. First part is for installing with Windows. You would use IIS to install with Windows. So you would open IIS, go to Features and View, and then double click the SMTP email. You would then choose the correct or insert the correct email address and choose a delivery method. Then you would go on to two different methods. You could follow those differently. Those are two separate methods. I believe one would be through some email and one would be through direct message or something like that. Next we have enabling TLS on a Linux server or Linux. So you would be using postfix to enable SMTPS protocol on a Linux server. And so the installation process would be something like enabling TLS on a, oh well, this is separate, enable. So the postfix for Linux would be using this command, the sudo command, sudo apt install mail utils, and then you would go on to use the other commands, set it only to loopback, and then restart it. And also wrote that you need to enable TLS on these mail servers or SSL for more secure mail servers. And lastly, we have SMTPS protocol hardening. So my first suggestion would be to enable SSL or TLS encryption on port 465 or whichever port that the client user is using, because these can be configured on a different port also. To use postfix or IIS, postfix for the Linux configuration and IIS for the Windows configuration. Next would be to set the firewall up to filter traffic on port 25 for SMTP and 465 for SMTPS. So like I said earlier, typically SMTPS is run on port 465. It is more secure, and setting up a firewall to filter the traffic will make it even more secure for both SMTP and SMTPS. Next, I said to configure the mail server to specific ports, email addresses, and security settings. So this kind of goes with the configuration and installation of SMTPS. So when configuring and installing, you want to make sure that you're installing it on the port that you want to install it, whether that be 465 or 25. You want to have the correct email addresses. And the correct security settings. Another hardening recommendation would be to back up email server data and configuration. This is always important for basically anything you do. You want to be able to back up your data so if you're attacked, you won't lose all of your data. Lastly, we have to configure SMTP authentication so attackers cannot use or access mail server. So you configure SMTP, and this prevents an attacker from intercepting your data. If they are able to intercept, it would be harder to read, and if they do try to gain access to your mail server, it would be harder to gain access or use for maluse. And lastly, we have my references.